Hi everyone, welcome and thanks for attending today's IB Middleware User Community webcast. My name is Kelsey Tipshirney and I'll be moderating today's webcast. Our topic is DB2 upgrade walkthrough from 10 to 11.1. All phone lines are currently in listen-only mode. We will have a question and answer session towards the end. However, feel free to ask a question at any time during the presentation using the Q&A widget located on your screen. Tomorrow, we will have the recording and slides of the presentation available. You'll receive a follow-up email with a link to download those from the archive. So now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. We have joining us Paul Stroud and Calvin Moody. They are both ITNM L2 software engineers with IBM. Thanks, Paul and Calvin, for joining us today. I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thanks, Kelsey. This is Calvin Moody. As Kelsey indicated, I am a L2 engineer with for IBM with the product ITNM. Today we're just going to walk through some steps that are necessary for upgrading your ITNM 4.2 level to DB2 11.1. My particular box that I'm working with here is currently at 10.1 or 10.5, I'm sorry, and we're going to upgrade it to 11.1. Just some steps that pretty much kind of gives us an agenda here to download the 11.1 to your server, obviously. Extract it and install it using the DB2 setup. That's the GUI pathway. There is a manual pathway as well. Stopping the instance, your current instance to DB2, and then upgrading that instance as root with the DB2 upgrade, and then upgrading the database, basically with the upgrade database command. Before we get started, there are some things as well. You should always back up your database, current database. So there are some steps in that process to making sure everything is turned off, like running the DB2 list applications. If DB2 is not stopped and turned off, you'll get an error returned. If it is, then you won't get any error. Also, you can run the DB2 list database directory to list all your databases you have involved for your upgrade. This is an example of backing up my databases here using the DB2 backup database command as your user ID, password for the various databases I have on my test box. And you just redirect them to a directory of your choice. While I was doing this backup, I did get an error, this SQL error. I did show a clean listing of all my DB2 processes being turned off, so I'm not quite sure why I got this error, but it does seem to be a prominent type error that you could get. Basically, I had to reset my DB2 communication, which is set to TCP/IP to null, in order to get this to work. So I displayed that setting with DB2 set, what it's currently set at. And then I changed it with DB2 set -null space DB2 com. Then you have to stop and restart DB2 after setting that. And then you have to obviously stop DB2 again. So to get this to work for the backup. This is all just backup information. After I did that, my backups ran cleanly. Then you have to reset the parameter back to what its original setting was, to TCP/IP. and then obviously stop and restart the DB2. There is a step also for DB2 prerequisite check. Since I'm running 10.1 or 10.5 on this particular box, and it's at 4.2, I have all the prereqs. The actual install does some prereq check for you as well. So, but there is a prereq check that's in the download that you can run. Also, it makes a statement you need 5 GB of temp space, free temp space in there, so just make sure you have plenty of space. This is all in the link, and unfortunately I didn't provide a link right here, but if you just Google DB2 10.5 and 11.1, there's several good links out there for this process. So anyway, I just go to the box where I actually have this downloaded, which is my ITNM core server, and go to the pathway where I have it downloaded. You can see that there, hopefully. And you use the DB2 setup command to run this in a VNC session. So I brought up my VNC session, and then ran the DB2 setup command. And it takes a few minutes for the GUI to come up. But you basically get this GUI, and you want to take a new install, because you are doing a new install of 11.1. It gives you the pathway. This is the default pathway, and it'll basically put it right next to the 10 dot, in the same pathway that 10 dot is. It's just in a different directory, obviously. This is going to be a typical install. You don't want to create an instance here, because you already have an instance. And obviously you want to accept the terms. And we're doing just a 11.1 enterprise edition here. That's the next slide. And we're just progressing. It takes probably 4 to 5 minutes for it to install. Basically, you'll see this if it completes successfully. If it doesn't, you will see an error message. You can go to the post-install steps to look and see any historical information you might want to gather, or any additional steps you need to take. In this case, there weren't really that any additional steps. Then you want to upgrade your instance. So you're going to go into the pathway of the new upgrade, which is version 11.1, and go to the instance directory. And this is all being done as root. And then you want to do a DB2I upgrade command that executable is in there. And then for your instance, which I only have DB2 inst 1 on this box. If you have a DB2 fence, you'll need to include that as well. If you only have DB2 inst 1, this is the command you'd run. In most of the examples I've seen in the documentation, it does have a -u, and then a space DB2 fence, and then space DB2 inst 1 to upgrade all your instances that you might have. Basically, this takes a few minutes for it to run, and you'll come out with a task 3, and it basically goes through these tasks. Also, I made another note about if you have another instance to upgrade that, to include that instance, I'm sorry. So basically the task 4 is the ending, and the executing has completed successfully, is a message you'll get. And if you want to look at more information, or if you have an error of some sort, this is the log that it creates over in temp. Then you can look now at the DB2 level and see that it's currently at 11.1. You'll have one step to complete, and that's the you basically restart the DB2, and then you upgrade your databases at that point in time with the DB2 inst 1 from that user, DB2 inst 1 from that instance, I should say. And it's just DB2 upgrade database and then your database name. In this case, it's NSIM, and then the other databases that I have on here are warehouse tips and SIT. So you want to go through those and upgrade those as well. And you should get a completed successfully on each one of those. Then you want to connect to your database, and obviously with ITNM, that's something we want to look at, and you should get this response. It's 11.1. And that pretty much completes the upgrade from 10 to 11.1. Any questions? I guess you can ask them now. It's pretty straightforward. It takes, well, it did take about an hour, but I was reading quite a bit and kind of making these slides along the way. But an actual installation with this information, you're probably looking at maybe 30 minutes to do this. In Alto. So that completes my presentation at this time.
Hey, Calvin. Hey, everybody. This is Paul Stroud, and today I'll be covering the DB2 upgrade, HADR upgrade to 11.1. This will work for any version that you want to upgrade. There are a couple of caveats. If you're using system automation to automate the databases, go ahead and give us a call first before you do so, and we'll give you some guidance on that. Essentially, you want to put your system automation into manual mode unless you're on Red Hat 7, and on Red Hat 7 you'll want to use the DB2 Haiku disable. But go ahead and, like I say, if you have system automation and you're upgrading your database, go ahead and give us a call and let us give you a bit of guidance on that, on what you need to do. So I've broken this down into 3 sections today. We have a pre-upgrade or a beginning section, a preparation section. And then we'll do the upgrade itself, and then we'll do the stuff that's necessary to do post-installation for the HADR stuff. First and foremost, it's not on the slide, but you need to have everything shut down. So you need to shut down ITNM, you need to shut down your GUIs, you need to make sure there's nothing reading to or from the database at the time you go to do the upgrade. So if you have multiple GUIs or multiple cores, backups, anything like that, you'll want to make sure that the entire ecosystem is shut down before you go to do this. The first thing you want to do to determine how to get started is determine which server is the primary. And we'll go through these commands in a minute, but I wanted to break them out in this way so that you would have kind of a timeline. If you see stuff where there are commands on the primary but not on the backup, the general idea is don't run the command until the previous command is finished. So for instance, on this slide where you make the backup of the DB, do that before you drop the database on the backup side. Now, in this particular instance, it really doesn't matter, but that's the way these slides are set up once we get into the later slides where it will matter in which order you perform the commands. The first thing we want to do is determine which one is primary. If you have multiple HADR databases, you'll want to make sure they're all primary on the same machine, and you'll want to perform the database backup for each one of them, as well as drop it on the backup. So once you have all your primaries on the same machine, then we'll want to go through and make sure that there aren't any connections. The next thing is check for connections. If there are connections, we'll want to force them down. And the next command, the DB2 force application all, will kill all connections to the database. Then you'll want to deactivate the database on both sides. After deactivated on the primary side, you'll want to make a backup. We'll probably not do anything with this backup, but it's a backup of the database before the process started if we have to have one. Once you've done with that, you can drop the database on the secondary. You do not have to drop the database on the secondary. It's just best practice for me to not have it there while doing the upgrade. We're going to have to restore the database back onto the primary, just as we did when we originally built the HADR pair. So my best practice is to go ahead and drop it. You don't have to. In fact, later in the presentation, I'll show you what happens if you don't, and it's just an error message. After you've completed the backup and you've dropped the DB on the backup, go ahead and stop both. Now remember to do this with all your databases. So if ITNM is not your only database, you have warehouse, TEMS, TIPS, whatever, make sure you do this for each of them before you move forward. The DB2 stop will stop all the databases on both machines. So let's go ahead and we'll take a look at this in action. So here our first slide is we're determining which one is the primary. If you look at the two commands, there's machine DB2A and machine DB2B. Right now, DB2A is the primary, DB2B is the standby. So that's important to know. And there's the command to run to get that information. There's much more information in the command. This is the most important information right at the top. Our next step is going to be to go ahead and prepare the secondary server. You can do the two servers at the same time. You can do one and then the other. You just need to make sure you get to both DB2 stops before you move to the next step, which is the upgrade itself. So here we list the applications. There is no data return, so that means there are no applications connected. We go ahead and deactivate the database, then we stop the HADR on the database, and then we drop the database, and then we stop DB2. That's pretty self-explanatory. On the primary server, it's a bit more interesting. So when we do the DB2 list application here, we can see that there's a local connection. I went ahead and ran the DB2 force application all. And that terminated the application, as you can see next, where I do the DB2 list application again and no data was returned. Then we go through the same process. We deactivate the database, we stop HADR on it, on the primary, we make a backup of the database, make sure you have a good copy of it. I've listed it out there. The time stamp that I have highlighted there is going to be used later. You'll want to keep that around. And this is in case you have multiple backups in the same database or in the same directory that you want to restore from. This will pick out this particular backup from that directory to make sure we have the right one. Okay, so this step we're going to move to the upgrade. I used the DB2 install to do this. You can use the GUI method as Calvin did in the earlier presentation. I find the DB2 install method a bit easier and quicker to use. It's deprecated, but it still works in 11.1, so that's what I used. So you want to go ahead and do the DB2 install. It takes 15 minutes or so for the actual install to be done. And again, you can do this on both machines at the same time. as long as when you get to the DB2 start, you then continue on the primary. So the first thing you want to do is do the DB2 install. After the install is complete, you'll again want to do the DB2I upgrade. That upgrades the DB2 instance itself. Both the install and this command should be run as root, unless your original install wasn't as root, and then you'll want to do it as whatever the original install user was. The next command will be DB2 start, so we actually start DB2 on the two servers. On the primary server only, you need to run the DB2 upgrade DB, again, as client Calvin did in the previous. That will upgrade the database to the 11.1 level. When you run, quick note, when you run the DB2I upgrade, make sure you run it from the new directory, so the 11.1 directory. The same command structure will be there for 10.1, 9.7, or 10.5. So you want to make sure you use the latest one so that you're upgrading the instance to 11.1. And here we'll start going through the commands. Here's the DB2 upgrade. Again, I'm running DB2 install. You can see the warning at the top. It says the support of DB2 install command is deprecated, but again, it still works. You have a few questions you'll have to answer. Install into the default directory. I said yes. If you have a different structure on yours, of course, answer that question accordingly. The next one is server. I am installing the ESE version. Depending on which version, again, you're using, you'll want to choose accordingly. And then do you want to install DB2 PureScale, which is a large-scale clustering environment? You don't want that. And so go ahead and answer no. And see it's got a total number of tasks to perform, 58, and then it'll go through and complete the tasks, and you'll see down at the bottom. It says the execution completed with warnings. That's the warning about the deprecated DB2 install command, so it's nothing to worry about, unless, of course, yours produces other warnings. And again, you'll do this on both machines. Next, you'll do the instance upgrade. And you'll see that it goes through a couple of steps with that. Again, you'll want to do this on both the primary and secondary machine. And once you get there, and you won't do the upgrade. Let me go back to the last one. You won't do the upgrade on the, oh wait, this is the instance upgrade. Yes, you'll do the instance upgrade on both. Okay. It's the DB upgrade. It's not there. Okay. All right. So these are our post-installation steps. So these you'll want to complete everything on the primary. So you'll want to go in steps. As you do this, you'll want to complete the stuff on the primary, transfer the files to the backup, restore the database on the backup, check and confirm the HADR configuration. We'll see a bit more on that in the slides to follow. Then you'll start and just as you did before, you'll start the HADR on the backup and then start the HADR on the primary. And again, for each database, you'll want to do the commands at the top. Quickly, the commands at the top aren't really required, where we activate, connect, terminate, deactivate, and make the backup. But it is definitely best practice that will let you know that the database itself is connectable and at least working at that point before you make the backup and send it to your backup machine. Let's see. All right, so here we are on the primary, and the start post upgrade steps there. So we do the DB2 start. Then we upgrade the database, then we activate and connect to the database, terminate the connection, deactivate the database, and make the backup. And again, keep in mind the timestamp here, we'll be using that when we do the restore on the backup. So go ahead and send your however you do that, transfer your file to your backup machine. And then, so you'll complete all those steps first, and then you'll move over to your backup machine. And here are our steps on the backup machine. We'll do a DB2 start. Once that's done, we'll do a restore of the database. You can see in that command that I've done a taken at, and I paste in that timestamp, and that's where that timestamp's important. Again, if you have multiple database backups in the same directory, that will ensure that you're pulling the correct one. In fact, if you run the command from the directory without the taken at, and you have multiple backups in that directory, you'll get an error about it not being able to understand which one you want. So using the taken at and the timestamp that was pulled from your previous backup command will allow you to make sure you're restoring the right database. You'll notice the warning here. It says the specified name of the backup image to restore is the same as the name of the target database. Restoring to an existing target database is the same as the backup image database. Will cause the current database to be overwritten by the backup version. Do you want to continue? Yes. That is the warning you will get if you do not drop your database in the first set of steps, in the pre-upgrade steps on your secondary machine. That is the only warning. It's the only error of any kind you'll get on that. If you drop the database, you will not get that. It will just do the restore, and it will tell you the restore is completed. You will have to restore the HADR settings on the backup database on the backup machine. So you'll want to run through those commands. I've got a little script there that I use, but it includes all the commands. And then you run that to update the database, terminate the connection at the end, and then you'll want to run the DB2 start. So you start HADR on the backup system first, and then you'll start it on the primary, as in the slide here. So you'll see that you start it on the HADR, and then or on the secondary, and then once it's started on the secondary, you'll start it on the primary. Again, you'll need to do that for each database that you have in your HADR configuration. And you can see that here. So this is on the primary machine again, DB2A, and you do the DB2 start here. So this covers, Calvin's covered the GUI installation, and in mine I did the CLI installation, so we've covered both there. So at this point, I think we've concluded the presentation part of it, and we can open it up to questions. Kelsey? Kelsey?
Yeah, so if you have a question, feel free to send it through that Q&A widget there on your screen. It looks like there's several of them coming through. Are you guys able to see those?
Yep, I am answering one of them now.
And feel free to just say it out loud and answer it out loud. So I mean,
okay, so the slides will the slides be made available? Yes, we'll create a tech note. I don't know if they'll be part of the posting of the video, but we'll create a tech note and attach both sets of slides to it. So if you just search on, ITNM 11.1 DB2 upgrade, we'll have a tech note out there that you should see for that. Ray, how do you know if you have HADR? So if we go back to slide, one second. So the first command on this slide, the DB2 HADR minus DB name, if you run that against the database, it will tell you whether or not, if you don't see the printout such as this, where you have a nice set, it'll give you a warning or an error. I don't remember exactly the warning message, but it will essentially tell you you don't have HADR. So if you get a warning from that command, you can assume that you probably don't have HADR. Can we get the slides for the presentation? Yes. What we'll do is Kelsey, we can get a list of the attendees and email addresses.
Yeah, they'll automatically get an email tomorrow with the slides and the recording.
Okay, excellent. Fancy, yes, you can upgrade from 9.7 to 11.1 directly. And for those that may be interested, if any of you are on 10.5 6.7 or above, there is a way to do a live upgrade so that you don't have to take everything down. But we didn't cover that here because most of our customers are not at that level, and likely you won't be either unless you have a DB2 DBA that's been doing that work for you. So unless you've upgraded from what came with ITNM, it's very unlikely that you'll be at a level where you can do a live upgrade. And I think that's it as far as I see. Let's see.
Paul, I think the cutoff is 9.5. If you're at 9.5, you have to upgrade to 9.7 in order to make this transition.
Right. Yeah. I think you're right. The 9.7 is the low that you can come from. You would need to upgrade 9. Anything else to at minimum 9.7 to be able to upgrade it. And Sandeep, yes, Kelsey said you will get the slides tomorrow as along with a link for the recording. And and of course, folks, if you have any questions on this that we haven't answered, feel free to open a PMR, and we'll be happy to answer the question for you. So I think that's it, Kelsey.
Okay, if there's not any other questions, we'll go ahead and close today's webcast. Thanks everyone for attending, and thanks to Paul and Calvin for presenting. Again, the recording and slides will be available tomorrow, so stay tuned for a follow-up email with a link to download those tomorrow. And that concludes today's event. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Thanks.